New York just officially crowned a new mayor, Democratic Socialist Zohran Mamdani.
I can see the dawn of a better day for humanity.
And he pulled it off despite a last-ditch effort from Cuomo backers, billionaires like Bill Ackman, and even Republicans like Trump who endorsed Cuomo, sparking one of the most hilarious thanks but no thanks reactions from any candidate ever.
The president does not support me. The president opposes Zohran Mamdani.
So why is everyone so terrified of Mamdani?
He is a jihadist.
And could his rise be the spark that forces a wake-up call in crypto as the revolution that was born out of anti-Wall Street sentiment slowly gets co-opted by the biggest names on Wall Street, and BlackRock's Larry Fink, and even Jamie Dimon?
Crypto is real. If you mean blockchain, stablecoins, you have a JPMorgan deposit coin, you can move stuff, smart contracts are real, all that stuff is real.
And if you believe the old adage that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, is it that big of a stretch to think Wall Street's public enemy number one could make for a better crypto mayor than people think? Maybe he's the perfect man for the job. Hide your kids, hide your wife. There's a Democratic Socialist coming for Gracie Mansion to replace New York's last mayor, Eric Adams. And if you recall, before all the drama, way back in the earlier part of the cycle, Adams purported himself to be the original Bitcoin mayor in America. He'd been boasting repeatedly that he took his first few paychecks in Bitcoin, and as it became clear his political career was dead, Mayor Adams was making the rounds for a crypto job and trying to make it clear at all the crypto conferences he was right on crypto all along. And who's laughing now?
I was the first American mayor to have my initial 3 paychecks converted into crypto. Many people laughed at me, and all I can say is, who's laughing now? And I keep telling them over and over again, who's laughing now? Who's laughing now?
All right, Mayor Adams, you were right to be paid in Bitcoin a couple of times. But to be fair, you also chose to get paid in Turkish Airlines miles. So is it really fair to say we are what we get paid in? If that's all it takes to be a crypto mayor, North Korea would have been running NYC a long time ago. So in this episode, if you'd humor us, we'd like to ask 2 important questions. What does it really mean to be pro-crypto, as politicians often claim to be? And does walking the walk mean more than just talking the talk? We'll come back to that second one to compare Coinage and Bankless later on in this episode. But first, let's take a stab at what it even means to be pro-crypto, and whether that lines up with what Mamdani represents. And to be fair, we should also start by admitting that comparing Mamdani to the revolution that Bitcoin sparked is already dubious at best. Bitcoin, an asset that was created out of a response to Wall Street greed and bank bailouts, is invariably entrenched in libertarian ideals, separating money and the state. Mamdani, as New York's Democratic Socialist mayor, obviously can't really be separated from the state since he's now an elected member of the state. But by the same token, we should also admit that Trump claiming to be the crypto president is almost equally as absurd, given, he's the commander-in-chief of the state. So instead, let's dig into the positions of each, because if you really squint, it's not that hard to see that Mamdani's rise to power mimics that of Trump, something even the mooch admitted to us recently on Coinage. I'm curious to get your take on that, kind of if you think Mamdani represents somewhat of the same things that Trump did when he was kind of on his rise.
Well, I think you're bringing up an interesting point.
Mamdani, like the crypto president and crypto itself, offered a new hope to people who increasingly felt disenfranchised. If you thought Wall Street's rigged game wasn't working for you, there was crypto. If you thought the woke left and DEI wasn't working for you, there was Trump. And yes, you could paint Mamdani as the alternative to reject Trump, but more specifically, rejecting what Trump represents. It's a slight distinction, but pretty important if you listen to Mamdani's victory speech.
We will hold bad landlords to account because the Donald Trumps of our city have grown far too comfortable taking advantage of their tenants.
And that's pretty important. Mamdani basically ran on an affordability platform. That the dream of owning anything at all has drifted so far out of reach for so many that renting is just the norm. And it's not just rent freezes. It's a bit deeper than that. It's the idea that there's a class of owners and everyone else. And you can disagree on the solutions Mamdani might enact. But attracting voters or believers on a hope that there's a light at the end of the tunnel is very much also why crypto became a thing. And core to that was ownership. Early users of Bitcoin's network earned the tokens as they participated in the network. But now, as Wall Street moves in and gets in on the game, everything else is coming along with it. Because if you haven't noticed, there's a lot of weird stuff going on as crypto and Wall Street collide. Solana's team was down on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Billionaires like BlackRock's Larry Fink and JPMorgan's Jamie Dimon were gushing over Bitcoin in Saudi Arabia. And that's been freaking out PayPal co-founder Peter Thiel so much that he's got issues with crypto now.
The sort of ideological founding vision of Bitcoin or these cryptocurrencies as sort of a, cypherpunk, crypto-anarchist, libertarian, anti-centralized government thing. This is always, the line.
Isn't that what got you interested in the first place?
That's what I thought was terrific about it. And then, the question is, does it really work that way? Or, has that thread somehow gotten lost? Maybe Larry Fink with the BlackRock ETF surrendered to the forces, the anti-ESG forces, or maybe it's more like Bitcoin's been co-opted by them, and I worry it was more the latter.
So just to recap, Bitcoin was launched by the anti-Wall Street crowd, only to be co-opted by the Wall Street crowd, which has pissed off the fintech anti-Wall Street crowd, led by Peter Thiel, which prompted Ethereum founder Vitalik Buterin to go out of his way to remind people Peter Thiel isn't really a cypherpunk to begin with. All right, so what does this have to do with Mamdani? And what does it have to do with what crypto once stood for? Well, if you think about it, Wall Street is undoing all the disintermediation that Bitcoin once fought for. It fought for community ownership without intermediaries extracting value from that community. And just look at what's happened with tokenized securities. They're basically replicating the same process that made Wall Street Wall Street. Banks tokenize an entity, IPO those shares through a stock exchange, price it and distribute it to a fund, and then maybe at the end, actual users might get to own slices of something they actually use. Seems a little weird when blockchains can already enable community ownership that looks a lot like what Bitcoin pioneered for anything and everything. And there is a New York City parallel here. In the early 1900s, when immigrants were living in tenements and home ownership was so out of reach, people banded together to buy cooperative buildings that they co-owned together. It helped little guys stand up to the fat cats and prevented more New York City real estate from being all completely owned by big companies.
I own the house. Me, Giuseppe Martini, I own my own house. No more we live like a pig.
Fast forward to today, and a huge chunk of those co-op buildings still stand. And while housing is still a problem across New York, it'd likely be a lot worse if we couldn't come together and figure out a better alternative.
Rent, it's too damn high.
And that's where we come back to the second question. Does walking the walk mean more than just talking the talk in crypto? And I want you to see why ownership actually matters, and why without it, what are we actually doing here? Because this hits very close to home for us at Coinage, offering the ability for anyone to co-own the first community-owned media outlet as a US co-op built on-chain. And to be fair, we aren't the first crack at that. We're just the first to actually deliver on it. There were a couple attempts before, but where are they now? There was, of course, Forbes' Web3 media project, which launched and sold NFTs only to quietly shut down earlier this year. And then there's Bankless, which originally launched as a podcast and newsletter before also launching a DAO that had the same name as that podcast and newsletter.
You and me, we need to help bootstrap this DAO, right? We're a part of it.
Because of that, many people boosted and promoted Bankless by buying into the DAO and the mission, thinking they were owning one and the same, until controversy struck and people realized that wasn't really the case.
People are confused about the lines that separate HQ and DAO. And as I say these words, I'm like, yeah, okay, I kind of get it.
You kind of get why they're confused.
I kind of get why they're confused, yeah.
As Bankless later cleared up, the DAO they created didn't actually own the Bankless IP. That was under a different entity. But that obviously didn't sit too well with people who bought into the mission, especially since they were told they all co-own things together. The Bankless forum has since been deleted, but an archive site still shows the back and forth as Bankless DAO members realized they didn't actually own the Bankless name. One person wrote, quote, "We hoisted the flag, we still bear the banner, and this is how you treat us." We must ask ourselves, do we walk the walk and talk the talk? Are we the embodiment of the Bankless nation? Another person wrote, quote, "The DAO is being strong-armed and left hanging in the wind while we bleed out." Now, it is worth noting, well, that's how the people who thought they owned Bankless felt. The people who actually did own Bankless went on to leverage the name and IP into launching a $35 million crypto VC fund. So maybe that's a good example of why ownership matters, because it's often the difference between making money and making nothing. And maybe it's an even better reminder of what's at stake here in crypto, because the divide between real owners and those who think they own something is only continuing to grow larger in America. It's also why Coinage and all of its IP is actually co-owned by the people who mint NFTs and become co-op members. So the same thing doesn't get repeated around here. Now, will that make me as rich as I could have if I wanted to keep everything to myself? Probably not. But it is cool to see the market start to value the real co-ownership we're offering appropriately. So does that make me a socialist, or just someone who believes that actually walking the walk might mean something more in crypto? I don't know. You tell me. All I know is that for crypto's revolution to work, ownership isn't a nice to have, it's a need to have. But I get why, to the people who only ever promise that might sound funny to them.
Does that look community owned to you?
Well, this is what Bankless could look like if we actually had some fantastic
if we actually raised money.
But make no mistake, the ownership revolutions are here, and fitting that they're both playing out in New York, where I sit right now.
It is the center of finance in America. It is the center of much of media.
This city is your city, and this democracy is yours too.
At a time when everything else in media is owned by the billionaires just the same, people may have thought building the first community-owned media outlet on-chain was just a joke. Well, to that, I say,
who's laughing now?